In the dead of night, a blood-curdling scream pierces the silence of the Ural Mountains. It's February 2nd, 1959. Outside, temperatures have plummeted to negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 50 Celsius. But inside the tent, something is terribly wrong. One unlucky camper is now dead. Soon, his 9 friends will suffer the same terrible fate. This is the terrifying true story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Back in those days, organized group hikes were all the rage among Soviet youth. And our story begins with a man named Igor Dyatlov, a ski instructor in his late 20s. He was an experienced outdoorsman who had summited many of the smaller peaks in the Urals. In January of 1959, he would plan his most ambitious hike yet. Along with 9 other hikers from the local ski club, they would trek across the northern Ural Mountains over a distance of roughly 125 miles, or 200 kilometers. This would be a moderate challenge for a group of seasoned outdoorsmen, but 2 of the 9 hikers would be complete beginners, and the weather forecast predicted nothing out of the ordinary. On January, the Dyatlov group left the train station in the town of Yekaterinburg, Russia. By January, they had arrived at their first stop, the village of Vitsai. And by January, they had set up camp near the river of the same name. As the days passed, they continued further into the wilderness, moving from one campsite to the next. They were scheduled to return to civilization on February but as the 2nd approached, something strange began to happen. The temperature started to plummet to unheard-of lows. Between February and the early morning hours of February, the group would make their final camp at an elevation of 1,000 feet, or 300 meters. This was around 20 miles, or 32 kilometers from their planned route. In the morning, they set off for what they thought was a nearby ski resort, unaware that they would never come back to this camp alive. At some point during the night, a blizzard hit, and when it was over, something was terribly wrong. The tent was partially collapsed, and there were strange footprints surrounding the campsite. These footprints appeared to have come from the hikers themselves, but they were headed in the wrong direction. They were also far too large for anyone in the group, except for Dyatlov himself, but he was still sleeping inside the tent. Outside, the temperature was now below negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 40 Celsius. Something had clearly spooked the group and driven them out of the tent and into the storm. But where could they have gone? The answer was not far away. Approximately 160 feet, or 50 meters from the tent, the authorities would later find the body of Zina Kolia. She was lying face down in the snow with her ski boots and backpack nearby. It seemed as though she had only been dead for a few minutes. Her eyes were wide open and staring blankly into the sky. One of the investigators would later write, "Her lips were so red that they gave the impression that they had been painted. Her face was pale and an unnatural death mask expression. The corners of her mouth were turned down, and a trace of foam could be seen on her lips. With her body preserved in such good condition, it seemed clear that she had died outside. But the others would prove much more difficult to find." On February 26th, the search party discovered another body, this time belonging to Yuri Krivonishenko. He was lying face up in a ravine approximately 160 feet, or 50 meters from the tent. This time, the authorities noted that his eyes were missing. Another hiker, Yuri Doroshenko, was discovered on February 27th. Like Krivonishenko, he was found in a ravine, but he had no boots or skis, and his clothing was soaked. His body was extremely emaciated, which made it hard to determine any cause of death. On March 2nd, 3 more bodies were discovered, those of Semyon Zolotaryov, Rustam Sloboda, and Nikolai Thibault. All 3 men were in various stages of undress, and none of them had any identification. Of the remaining 3, Alexander Balabanov was discovered first. On March 12th, he was found sitting upright and fully clothed. Despite being half submerged in snow, his clothes were dry, and he had no signs of injury. He was even still wearing his ski mask. The last 2 bodies, those of Lyudmila Dubinina and Igor Dyatlov, would not be recovered until 1991. Dyatlov was found at the bottom of a ravine with his hands and feet severed. It would take several days for the search team to find the rest of his remains. Now, it was clear that these 9 people had died in the wilderness, but the question was how. When the autopsy reports came back, they contained some disturbing answers. Most of the victims had died from hypothermia, but they had also suffered strange injuries. Dyatlov, Dubinina, and Krivoniskenko had major chest trauma, possibly from a heavy object pressing against their chests. This would explain why their lungs had collapsed, yet their ribs were unbroken. Other strange findings included empty stomachs, traces of radiation, and most bizarre of all, orange skin. On February, a radio operator picked up a strange transmission from a nearby radio tower. According to him, the message was unlike anything he had ever heard before. Some claimed it sounded like a distress call from an aircraft, while others said it sounded like a woman screaming. Later, the men would report hearing strange noises throughout the night, including a metallic ringing and voices in an unknown language. It soon became clear that all 9 hikers had died from exposure, but they hadn't been outside in the cold for very long. Yet another mystery was that none of them had any alcohol in their systems. This was strange because they had plenty of vodka with them. And even stranger was that all of their belongings were neatly packed in their backpacks. It almost looked as if they had planned to leave the area. And finally, there was the question of their watches. When they were discovered, all 6 of the watches were stopped at approximately 1:30 a.m. Yet a thorough search of the area failed to turn up any clocks that may have been dislodged from their clothing. So how did they know the time? Well, the answer lay in the food. When the hikers left their second camp, they had planned to meet up with a group of locals at a nearby hunting lodge. But after waiting in vain for several hours, they decided to head back to their tent. But the strange thing was, they had eaten all of their supplies before leaving. This was unusual because the previous day they had eaten nothing but bread and porridge. With no other options available, they had planned to eat their final meal at approximately 8 p.m. That meant they had spent nearly 5 hours walking through the freezing cold without any sustenance. But why would they have done this? We may never know, but one of the prevailing theories is that they tried to escape a deadly avalanche. According to this theory, a slab of snow broke off a nearby mountain and crushed their tent while they were asleep. Those unfortunate enough to be buried in the snow suffocated to death, while those who managed to claw their way out stumbled blindly through the forest, eventually succumbing to the bitter cold. However, there were some strange details which didn't fit this theory. For example, some of the hikers had swapped clothing with one another, and this wouldn't make sense if they were in a hurry to save themselves. Even stranger was the fact that some of the victims had taken off their clothes before dying. Could it be that they were trying to warm themselves up? But if that was the case, why did they do it outside in the freezing cold? As the years went by, more theories emerged, including the infamous one involving secret military tests. According to this account, the US and USSR were secretly testing new weapons in the region, and the hikers inadvertently stumbled upon a test site. This would explain the strange orange glow, which some witnesses saw on the night of February. However, there is zero evidence to support this claim. The same can be said of the UFO theory, even though it makes for a fun movie. In reality, we may never know what truly happened to the Dyatlov group. But in 2020, scientists from the Czech Republic offered a compelling explanation. They studied a massive slab avalanche which occurred in the area and concluded that it had buried the hikers' camp. Furthermore, they proved that a person could survive being buried under 160 feet or 50 meters of snow for up to 15 minutes. This could explain how the hikers got outside and why their bodies were found so far away from the tent. The lack of any broken bones suggested that the snow had acted as a cushion and protected their bodies. The only question is, what caused the avalanche? According to the scientists, it could have been triggered by nothing more than thin air. While slab avalanches are rare, they can occur without any warning. Just like their victims, all we can do is speculate about what really happened to the Dyatlov group. What we do know is that their tragic deaths continue to haunt the wilderness of northwest Russia. And in a way, they are still trapped in the snow, forever searching for an answer. Thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time.